Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Content Workshop, where we talk about content in depth. I am your host, Sam Majama, and today we are joined by a very special guest, EsportsDoug. Doug, I'm so glad that you were decided to join us. Doug is a caster, commentator, host, analyst, content creator. He wears a ton of hats. We were talking about before the podcast. He does a little bit of everything, and today he's here to tell us his background, his story, and give us a little bit of insight on what he does. How you doing today, Doug?
I'm doing super well. I think given the state of the global pandemic that's going on, I'm just very thankful that we can do something like this. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I've been very, very excited about doing this. I'm pumped, dude. This is going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, man, it's always fun doing this, and you're the first person that I've done a podcast with in like the talent category, I guess, for lack of a better term. Like, haven't gotten that perspective, so it's gonna be really nice. I've had writers, marketers, but I haven't had any talent guys, and I feel like you guys are the easiest to talk to when it comes to this type of stuff. You're already natural in front of the camera, so
You just set the bar real low,
yeah.
right? Like, think about this. You're only going to get better from here.
No, yeah, exactly. But so I guess to start off, just I already gave a little bit of introduction, give you a little bit of your background and what you're all about, and we'll go from there, man.
Yeah, so I guess elevator pitch, right? I've been in the esports space in some form or fashion for holy smokes, over a decade, 13 years. I started off competing back in the OG Halo 1 days.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, way back when.
Yeah.
That should tell you guys roughly how old I am. It should give you a tell. But I competed for a while, and then transitioned to coaching. Coaching eventually turned into analysis, and that's really what led to more content creation in general. So I'm a sucker for numbers and statistics and data. I'm a nerd for that kind of thing. So I was able to start doing some of that in the esports space, and that led to writing. So I'll see if I can remember this. So I started, my first written piece was for a brand that no longer is called this, but they were called Instant Esports.
Okay.
They are now, if I'm not mistaken, a different platform, but they operate under the name of Blitz.gg. I think.
Yeah. Blitz. I know them from League. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I wrote for them first, and I remember at that point I was very heavily into League, and my first piece was around SK Telecom, I think, or TSM or something, and I just like geeked out. I was like, I can't believe I'm doing this. Like, this is something I've always wanted to do. So really cool opportunity there. From there, I ended up writing for ESL, Red Bull, and then ESPN. And through some of those connections, I was able to fortunately make my way onto a camera and onto a microphone and get to casting. And I've been casting freelance for the last probably 2-3 years or so. And man, I love I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah, I've seen you a couple of times on different broadcasts and stuff like that, just doing some different like freelance work. But the 2v2 tournaments, obviously, with the Rockers, where I first saw you like in depth, like it was right there. The first time I got to interact with you, I guess is the best way to put it.
Sure.
But for you, what was your first what was your first like actual job like in the casting? Like, what for your first gig that you had, like official one?
Yeah, so it was I don't remember the year. It was EGLX in Toronto.
Okay.
My very, very first casting gig was actually Call of Duty. So I was working with Paradox, who's now an observer for the Call of Duty League. Lando, he's Lando. He's creating content for EG.
Yeah.
Everyone knows who Lando is. And Lemon Kiwi, who's now doing a bunch of content in the Overwatch space. So I'm like casting with them, and I'm like a fish, right, in the deepest depths of the ocean that I've ever been in. I've never casted before. And I'm, super nervous at first, and I didn't tell anybody. Well, like my co-casters didn't know. The guys who hired me knew that I had never casted before, but I wasn't gonna tell my co-casters that.
Yeah, you gotta leave that in dark.
Yeah, you like fake it until you make it.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
Is exactly what it is. So we got done that weekend, and we were like celebrating. It was Sunday. And that's when I told him, I was like, guys, I just wanted to thank you so much for everything you've taught me, and just the opportunity to work with you guys. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I've never casted before, ever. And they gave me such a hard time for it, and in like playful, good banter. But yeah, EGLX Call of Duty. I don't even remember what Call of Duty title it was, to be honest. But yeah, that's really where I started off.
Okay, yeah, and starting off is I guess a good segue for what we were talking about before. Like, what were some of your inspirations with casting? Like when you originally first started, like who were you looking to? Obviously, you don't want to emulate people. You want to make your own kind of brand and own pace. But at the same time, like who are some of the people that you really look to try to glean from as much as possible?
Yeah, I think the first person that comes to mind is actually Puckett.
Okay.
Again,
Hmm.
as an old school Halo guy,
Yeah.
I like grew up watching him talk about sneaky beavers and jumping blaners and Puckett rockets, and like that really set the foundation for what, once I realized that that was something I wanted to pursue,
Hmm.
what I wanted to emulate. And to your point, yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about creating your own brand and your own
Hmm.
image. But when you've got some world class talent, I would be remiss not, to like try to pick up stuff from them and learn from them. So Puckett was definitely one, and then Rivington
Hmm.
from the LCS is another one that I've looked up to and respected for so long.
Hmm.
Um, they're actually a lot from the LC or from League of Legends. Riv is one. Captain Flowers
Hmm.
is another guy who's, and he I want to take a moment to actually, I'm going to say this about both Captain Flowers and Medic
Hmm.
from the LEC. So in my I've looked up to them and I've respected them for a long time, and I at one point created a reel, like a commentary reel, a shotcasting reel, a highlight reel, and I sent it to them.
Hmm.
And I'm like, these guys get reels all the time, right?
Oh
Like
yeah. Hmm.
this random Joe is sending him a reel so he can look at it, blah blah. Um, and both of them looked over it, and both of them responded, and both of them gave incredible feedback, like
Hmm.
stuff that not only was it feedback from someone that I look up to and someone that I respect and someone that I want to emulate, but it was also very detailed feedback and very good
Hmm.
feedback, and it was very obvious that they took time to invest and
Hmm.
time to be willing to do that. And honestly, without going too far down this rabbit hole, that's really hard to come by in the
Yes, it
esports
is.
space these days.
Hmm.
Yeah, not everyone, not everyone is willing to help out other
Hmm.
people. It's unfortunate, but it's true. So, I just those two guys, yeah.
No, yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and just to add on that point, like I am in no way means like anywhere in the esports space and success yet, but had like younger kids like ask me like, hey, what should I do with people and or what should I do to get my name out there and stuff like that. I'm like, hey, just send your resume, send like what work you've done, send it to people. Like I've sent my like some marketing products and like resume to like I'd say 30 people, but like you said, it's really rare to come by when people give you detailed feedback because I've only had I'd
Hmm.
say 3 or 4 people that actually responded like, "Hey, here's what I think you should do better," and that's just so invaluable
Hmm.
because they're taking the time to do that. You know that feedback's genuine.
Hmm.
So I do agree with that. And to your point on Puckett, one thing I always liked about him was that he has the ability to just like today we're dating when we're doing the podcast with the T1 event with Valorant. Like he's
Hmm.
just able to jump in and start talking about it. And I'm like, all right, this dude's seen this game for 3 days. Like, how do you go in and talk that like soundly with that good of pace that quickly? Like, I feel like it's a rare skill.
Yeah, he's incredibly, and I mean, I think one of the benefits is that he's been around shooters for as long as he has,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But Puckett, I think about world class talent
Mm-hmm.
and Puckett. The two names that come to mind are Puckett and Golden Boy
Mm-hmm.
every time.
Yep, yep. Both of those are definitely stables, and like you said, Captain Flowers, like any of the LCS, LEC talent, I guess the best way. I love like that core group because they have the perfect balance of like, I guess for lack of a better term, BSing and also being analytical in games. Like they just ebb and flow in and out throughout the entire game. Like there's sometimes where you're like they're talking about something they did at home, and the next second they're talking about some super in depth play. I've always liked that about League of Legends.
Well, like you step back,
Mm-hmm.
right, and you think about all of this, and you come to the very sobering realization that there are maybe 100 people in the world,
Mm-hmm.
maybe 100 people in the world who can say that they do this full time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then you start listing off some of those names, right? The Puckets, the Mavens, right? The Pansies, who's currently casting right now the
Yep.
Valorant event with Puckett, the GBs, the LEC guys, Shocks, like the list goes on, and all of a sudden you realize that like there's this level of talent,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a reason why there are only a handful of people who can say they do this full time. It's because they're up here. It's because they're the best of the best
Mm-hmm.
across the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we were talking on your stream one day about how hard it is to break into that. So going back
Mhm.
to your feedback point, it's really nice to see, like you just said, it's like you're sitting at the top of the 100 people. Like, to take the time to get a guy to possibly like get to that next rung in the ladder is actually even more rare and beneficial, because like they want to stay in that 100 spot. So like it's really
Mhm.
really invaluable when they do give you that feedback. But yeah.
You know, that's, you just touched on something that I've observed, unfortunately, in like the amateur and the semi-professional casting talent space, whatever you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
is there's this belief, unfortunately, that there are only so many jobs,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
to an extent that's true, but it's not like there are only 100 jobs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's it. And there are those 100 people, and no one else is going to get in. And you have to like step on people on the way there,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not accurate,
Mm-mm.
right? And unfortunately, that's something that it's a it's it's toxic. It's cancerous, to be honest. To like the amateur space and the semi professional talent space, you don't need to step on people
Mm-mm.
to get somewhere, right? Like there's not just one job.
No.
There's just so much to be said about like looking out for other people, and realizing that at the end of the day, when you if and when you find yourself fortunate enough to be working an event for a weekend, you're going to have a lot more fun if the people around you like you and you like them and you're
Mm-hmm.
pleasant to work with. If you're not pleasant to work with and you're, you know, fill in whatever adjective you want to fill in, chances are you're not going to get a call back.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I agree. And even, and I'll even go on the air of the selfish side of reasons, right? Like I've learned in corporate business world, even in younger years, like that one person that you don't reach a hand out to, or that you don't talk to, make that connection with, that could be a person where 4 years from now, that's the person you need. Like, you burn one bridge, and 3 years from now, you're like, man, I wish I could get into that spot. And you say like,
Mm-hmm.
who's in there? And you see that guy, you're like, crap, I should have talked to that dude.
Mm-hmm.
I've learned that. I'm not saying make friends with everybody and be like a fake nice guy. I'm just saying, like, don't just shut people out. Like, even if it's for a selfish reason, like, keep them in, because it's just going to help yourself out even more. And you always get more perspectives, especially in talent. Talent is so diversive and so different. Like, getting different perspectives on how to do things. Like, y'all's job is probably one of the most unique jobs per person there is. Like, getting as much perspective you can is so beneficial.
Well, just like don't be a crummy human,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Like
Be a
just,
good dude.
yeah, be like a good people are going to want to work with you if they enjoy being around you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's just not, yeah, just don't don't suck. That's the best advice I could give people. Just don't suck.
Yeah, exactly. Going into though, like enjoying the cast, and like as we segue into further things, is what has been your favorite, I guess, esport to commentate, and then also I can add on one thing in this prompt is, what is your favorite esport to commentate, and then what was your favorite event that you've had so far that you've hosted?
Okay.
I know it's gonna be hard.
So, uh, yeah. So, okay. Up until now,
Hmm.
my favorite game to cast has been League of Legends,
Okay.
and it's for a number of reasons, and I could explain. I think when you are watching or when you're playing League of Legends, you're telling a story over 30 to 40 minutes,
Hmm.
right? And one thing will always have a significant impact on the next thing, and it just continues to snowball for the length of the game.
Hmm.
So the game really allows itself to tell a story, and I think, in my opinion, that's one of the really important things, probably the most important thing,
Hmm.
of a play-by-play commentator, a color commentator. Yeah, everyone likes the hype and like the memorable lines, and that's what makes its way onto videos and montages and whatnot. But tell a story,
Hmm.
right? Like, get people invested, get them looped in with compelling storylines, and I think that's what makes people stick around. So League, in my opinion, really lends itself to that, like the early game and how it translates into the mid game and the late game. And um, one of the other things I really like about it, again, I can be so nerdy and so analytical,
Hmm.
there's so much depth to that game.
Oh yeah.
and
Hmm.
and this isn't to take away from other games, right? I,
Hmm.
I want to be really careful about how I portray that, but there's just so much depth to that game, and there's so much you can talk about at any given point in time. And again, the narratives change depending on what time you're in the game.
Hmm.
And then, you think about those game defining team fights where it can be like dead silence, and then at the flip of a switch, both teams are just throwing everything they have each other, everything in the kitchen sink, and there's so much there's so much tension, and there's so much, again, I hate to beat a dead horse, but there's so much story to tell, and that, at least from what I've experienced and what I've been fortunate to be able to experience over time, League really lends itself to that.
Yep, no, I agree, and I'm glad you brought the point, because as you were talking, like, I was thinking of, like, the one thing I wanted to bring about League is, like you said, there's so much micro play and micro narrative in League, because you have team fights, you have these big hype team fights where everybody's coming together, but at the same time, it's like you said, it's stories, but it's 5 different stories. It's 5 different players on the map, all doing different things. Like, you could honestly, like, take a caster, take a host, and you could just watch the jungle and watch what he's doing, and there's a narrative. You could watch your ADC's doing, what your top's doing. Like, there's 5 narratives that you have to kind of track at the same time, and then when that big team fight happens, you have to be able to give why that team fight happened the way it happened, because the jungle was doing this pathing, because he decided to take this item that has 10% more of this on it, like 80 versus AP. Like, there's, like you said, going back what you said without going in the rabbit hole, there's so much micro play in that game. Like, I've played it. I'm a dirty silver player. I'm not that good at it, but there's so much micro play in that game. It would take years to figure it out sometimes. So for people to be able to, like, share that narrative like you're talking about, it takes a lot of skill and finesse, basically.
Well, and I think the game is unique, and you don't see this in very many other games. Especially at this level. Let me think about how to say that differently. There are a few other games that do what I'm about to say to this extent. League, all, like, the entire, let's say it's a 40-minute game. For 39 minutes and 30 seconds, it's all building up to one moment. Right? Like that final team fight, or that throw at Baron, or like that TP flank at the end when you're like 40 minutes in. Everything boils up to that one moment. So when you think about, like, a climactic, game-defining, potentially event-defining, series-defining moment, there are a few things that punctuate an esport, that punctuate a matchup, punctuate a moment like League can.
Yep. No, I 100% agree. I mean, I've watched CS majors, I've watched Call of Duty finals, watched Halo finals. Like, the other week, it was the LEC with G2 when they got upset, like, in Game 5, and it was a 2v4 on freaking the Nexus, and G2 was about to win it, but he got that 3-piece, and then they went back on G2. Like, that was one of the most, like, for my own emotions, that was way more emotional and, like, ebb and flow than any other esport, just because of how the talent was driving the narrative, but also just how that game works. Like, it's just there's very few other esports that rival the level of hype and the level of, just emotion that goes into that game, even though it's so simple from a viewer perspective. It's so simple.
Well, and I think there's another genre that admittedly I have not had the fortune of casting, that I have always wanted to cast, that carries some of the similarities, and I can explain what I mean. But that's the battle royale scene. Think about some of the stuff we just discussed around League, and how it all, like, ramps up to this one culmination. That's a battle royale game in its definition, right? Like, that's the whole foundation of the game, is the gas closing in and it all coming down to one pivotal moment. So that's just something I know that wasn't necessarily something you asked, but
no, yeah,
there are just so many similarities there, and that's just something that I think would be really cool to get to experience one day.
Okay, awesome. And then also the second part of that one, I know it's hard, but what has been your favorite event to cast so far? That's gotta be difficult, because it's probably each of them probably has their own reason why they were good.
Okay, I'll say this. My favorite. I wasn't. Oh man.
What's the issue? Like, what do you?
I thought I had an answer, and then I thought about something else. Okay. I think I'll say one, and then I'll have an honorable mention.
Okay, that's fine.
My favorite one, and I'll explain why, was probably the launch weekend for the Call of Duty League.
Okay.
I didn't cast it, but I was on site doing some in-house analysis. and admittedly, like, my segments were not long, they weren't even on stream, but there was just something so special about being a part of creating history,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, the very first time the Call of Duty franchises league spots, the very first home event ever, the very first major esports event in the state of Minnesota. That, like, there were so many firsts.
Mm-hmm.
That just to be able to play a role as small as it was, just to be able to get to be involved, was something that was so special. And
Mm-hmm.
while I would have loved, obviously, any talent will say this, but while I would have loved to have the opportunity to have been more involved, just
Mm-hmm.
again to be able to say that that was something that I was involved in, and I was fortunate enough to be able to contribute to that. Like, it was just so special.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Yeah.
so special.
No, I know what you mean, and also like maybe a little bit of bias given I have the hat on, but like the rock, yeah, the working with the rocker too. Like obviously you've had way more interaction than me, but I've had a little bit of interaction with the staff there and some of the C-level people. Like that family environment and what they're fostering over there probably made it even better because just the whole narrative they were driving and everything that they were working on. Not only it's the first event in the new Call of Duty League, but like you just said, first event in Minnesota, first event in the franchise league, first event with a brand new organization that was created like 3 months prior, and this is a $25 million investment. Like, there's so many firsts there, and the fact that it went as smooth as it did, and probably everybody was working their ass off, for lack of a better term, probably made it that much even better. Like, you know those people, you live in that area, like you're around that area, so it made it even better, probably.
Yeah. I think the people, yeah, the people and the grandeur of it all was something that was so special.
Mm-hmm.
And I think to toot their horn a little bit, I do think the Rocker organization is creating something special, and I think it's just an awesome group of folks. I've made friends
Mm-hmm.
from the people that are in that organization, like genuine friends,
Mm-hmm.
not just like work acquaintances or anything like that. And I've had the fortune of working with a number of different organizations, and you can't say that about all of them. They're not all that pleasant to work with, and they're not all that fun and friendly and family oriented in a sense. So yeah, the Rocker family is really cool. I think the next event, honorable mention,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll say this because I've never worked an event like this before, and there's a good chance I will never work an event quite like this ever again.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with Big Buck Hunter?
Yeah. Yeah, like the arcade game?
Yes. Yeah, the bar game.
Yeah.
I had the privilege of working the Big Buck Hunter World Championships in Vegas.
That's a thing. Okay. That's a thing.
Dude, and it's like 20 grand for first place.
What?
Like, yeah, it was awesome. Talk about family. So it was out in Vegas. It was this past October, and I had the privilege of being involved as a floor interviewer host thing. And man,
I have so many questions.
good. You should. The Big Buck Hunter community.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about like Rocker as an org, and that's fine, but the Big Buck Hunter community, like the players, that's family.
Mm-hmm.
Like they love each other. That entire community, that entire organization loves each other, and it starts at the top, right? Like the play mechanics folks that I had the privilege of working with, all the way down to the players, the spectators. That was my first event working that event with them.
Mm-hmm.
And there were people who had been working that event for many, many years, and they just welcomed me in with open arms. Again, the players, the staff, the spectators, everyone was just so awesome. And I'll say this, that event was so special because it was so unique. Just to give you like a taste of how unique it was,
Mm-hmm.
I took a shot on camera.
That's awesome.
Like as part of the broadcast, like,
yeah.
And I can't say I've ever done that before, and there's a really good chance I'll never do it again.
Yeah.
But when you talk about how unique an event that was, and the people and how cool that was, yeah, I've got that's strong honorable mention.
Yeah, it's funny that Like, because you can't do events like that at scale just because it doesn't work. There's way too many variables. Like, you can't do that. It has to be that tight knit community. I guess I mean it's not too far fetched because I mean in traditional sports, like I come from Charlottesville, Shenandoah area in Virginia, and they're known for cornhole. It's like the cornhole world championships. Like usually the finalist is from my area, so like everybody's like, I watch it on ESPN, and people are like, "You're weird." I'm like, "No, it's a tight knit community. Like
And
I'm used
cornhole's
to it."
awesome.
Yeah,
How do you not like cornhole?
I know people just don't think it's a national sport. So I guess it's the same thing. One, I invested my time in video games the wrong way. I should have went in the big buck hunter, 20K prize pool.
You still can, dude.
Yeah, that's awesome though. I have so many questions. That's for a whole new podcast. Like, how do you get good at that game? Like, what do you do? Like, oh god. Anyway, but that's awesome. I'm glad that's such a unique answer, and I'll talk to you about that off broadcast just to save
good.
time.
Sounds good.
But yeah, so as we move on, what I guess a good segue is what esport you kind of hinted at a little bit. What esport have you not commentated yet professionally that you would like to commentate as of right now?
Yeah, the first one that comes to mind is Warzone, and it's messy, right? Because technically, we don't know if Warzone's going to have a professional scene. Right now, it's been very casual and very like charity oriented or famous streamer, celebrity type oriented. I do think the game has a lot going for it. Excuse me, and I think it can have a scene like that, given support and infrastructure. And there are a couple of things that are needed, but I certainly think when you look at the H1Z1s, when you look at the PUBGs, when you look at the Apexes, the Fortnites, the foundation's there.
Yep.
Right? It's there. And I understand from Activision's perspective wanting to focus on the CDL. I get that. I do. But if they wanted to, you could do something really special with Warzone. So Warzone's definitely one. And again, it goes back to you get to tell a story, and there's so much like climax that comes down to like this one defining moment, and to be able to usher people along, the viewers and the listeners and the spectators, usher them along and share that with them. That's irreplaceable in my opinion. That really is. So the Warzone's one, and then I think again, not to like beat this too bad, but I do think tactical shooters and Valorant, it specifically carries a lot of those same traits to it as well. Like it's round based, and talk about one event having an impact on everything throughout the entirety of the game. That's like the foundation of economy, right? Like that's how it works.
You win one save round, like you just shifted the whole game pretty much.
Absolutely. Yeah. So to be able to, so I was watching before this, the T1 tournament, the Valorant tournament. A team is up real big, right? The team that's down rattles off 6 rounds in a row to force an overtime, and it comes down to a 1v1 in overtime. Imagine that in a packed out venue where the entire tournament comes down to that one fight.
Oh yeah,
that 1v1.
I didn't even know what was going on. Like he went through the portal and he used a cipher roll. Like there was so much going on there. Like yeah, I cannot imagine like that being 1,000 people watching that. A couple thousand people watching that. It was insane.
Well, again, it's just like this desire to be able to. That I think that's the job as a commentator, as a caster, is to take what you're observing, what you're calling, and bring everyone else along with it. Right? Like you want your passion, you want your excitement, you want your knowledge to come through in your broadcast, and you want the spectators to feel that with you and to come along with you in that experience, in that story. And Valorant, I think obviously there's a lot of excitement around Valorant, and a lot of it, in my opinion, is very well placed.
Yeah, it is.
But Valorant can fit that really well.
Yep, and without this being a Valorant podcast, it relates to talent. Is why I think it's important. Is one thing I think Riot's doing that's not a Riot thing normally is seems like they're going to allow third party in the right setting, a third party tournament organizers and hosters, which is huge for like talent and huge for anybody to be able to work in the space and be able to continue on that esports. I think that is a good esport to pick once it becomes a full-fledged esport for sure.
Well, and you kind of have to, as talent,
Hmm.
you want to be strategic about where you invest your time, right? Um, the thing that's so unique about Valorant, and this will come full circle. Roll with me for a minute.
Hmm.
The thing that's so unique about Valorant here is the best talent across every single game is going to be going to Valorant, in
Hmm.
my opinion, right? That's my prediction.
Yeah.
Talent from CS, talent from Apex, talent from Fortnite, talent from League, talent like
Rainbow
the
Six
best
even.
of
Yeah.
yeah, Rainbow Six, the best of the best are gonna make their way over there to
Hmm.
work that game. So when you look at that from an amateur talent perspective, you think, well, so much for that, right?
Hmm.
Like back to what we were chatting about earlier. When it gets to something like that, there are a limited amount of jobs, right?
Yep.
So for them, for the best talent in the world, those the cream of the crop of those 100 folks we were talking about, for
Hmm.
them to go to that, that's hard for amateur talent. So for Riot to come out and say that they are going to allow third party events and they are going to allow different organizations to run events for amateur talent, that's huge.
Hmm.
That's so big. Like I can't stress the importance of that enough, because it gives people opportunities and platforms that wouldn't normally be there. and
Yep.
and that's like that. The talent industry, I liken it so much to the music industry, and that's a different conversation as well. We can chat about that for a long time. um, but talent is looking for a break,
Hmm.
and with so many eyes on something like Valorant, talk about a break.
Yeah, and exactly, and even like we talked about the music industry a little. My dad was a music major, so I get the analogy 110%. We talked about it on your stream one day, but yeah, I agree. Like, and even if you wanted to find your niche, like you could be the main talent lead for like a DreamHack type circuit or something like that. Like, it doesn't even have to be the main circuit, so to speak. And hopefully Riot does it right, where there is a main Riot league, and then there's also they just let people play out what they want to play out, so you can have work, pretty much anywhere you want. And I think the online side of things will also be big too.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see it emulate how CS works in a lot of ways.
Hmm.
You have like the ESL Pro League, but then you have majors and you have minors, and MLG was involved for a while. And, there are so many different ways that can play out, assuming Riot supports it, which I really hope they do.
Yep. Yeah. So those are two definite ones. Valorant, obviously, going back to what we said about esports, you haven't commentated yet that you would want to. I think that's definitely a viable one, even though it just started. But getting into a little bit on the current, I guess my original prompt was, what's your take on the current talent landscape of esports? But I guess the better prompt is, what are there any voids you see in talent that needs to be filled, or how do you see yourself like attacking that space, to try to fill and add to it? I guess is the best way to ask.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of, and I'm thinking specifically about Warzone here,
Mm-hmm.
but there are a lot of Warzone tournaments these
Mm-hmm.
days, right? Think
Yeah.
about the Code Green tournament. Think about Warzone Wednesdays. Think about all of those events.
Mm-hmm.
They are all primarily, not entirely, but primarily speaking, they're all geared towards the celebrities
Mm-hmm.
and the famous streamers. So let's say you wanted to play in a Warzone tournament. As I say this, like I think I saw an event yesterday that is challenging what I was saying, but for a long time, and I still think it's a disservice that we aren't seeing more of this. But say you wanted to play in a Warzone tournament, there's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
Where are you gonna play?
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can apply to get chosen by for like Warzone Wednesdays with Keemstar or something like that, but like what are the chances of that? And
Yeah.
there aren't a ton of venues for the average player to be able to play in something like that. So I think that's something um, that is lacking. And to tie that back to talent, the same applies,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, if there are no, as talent, you can grind and hustle and hope that you get a bid and you get selected, um, or asked to cast a large event, like Warzone Wednesdays, or you're starting to see some of the CDL organizations start running some of their own, which is awesome. But if you don't, then what?
Yeah.
There's nothing there. So I do think that's something that is really interesting, where there's a need. And I wouldn't be surprised. I think Valorant's not going to be that bad because obviously they already have their custom lobbies built into the beta, and there are so many people in it now that it's much easier to facilitate. But I think across the board for talent, you've got your tier 1 events, you've got the big ones, right? Then there's like a gap, right? For someone in the talent space to make it, you've got to have the platform to make it on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree. You're hitting the jump to the ledge instead of like climbing some ladder rungs. Basically, is how it works in the talent space. It seems like there's no. I actually can't. It's funny you bring that point up because I'm thinking in my head. I can't think of a mid-level talent tier. Like I can think of mid-level esports. I guess is the best way to put it. Like you're the head talent guy for a tier 2 esport maybe, but I can't think of. Yeah, I can't. Like I can think of tier 2 for competitors. I can think of tier 2 for business and C-level guys. I can't think of a tier 2 for a talent kind of oriented person.
No, and I think you put it very succinctly. You're jumping onto a ledge. You're leaping onto a ledge instead of going a couple of rungs and working your way up. And I do think that's a byproduct of the infancy of it all. Hey, like we're just a couple of years into this thing, right? Like, yeah, esports is as a concept, esports has been around for a long time, and yeah, I will testify to that early on, and I know that there are many people who have been around longer than I have who have seen it in even more primitive states than what I've seen. But it's young, right? Like there are certain like foundational things that are missing from there that I in my opinion would do a huge service to the ecosystem, to the infrastructure of esports as an entity, as a space, as an industry. If some of those were plugged.
I will say one thing that I think is missing. You tell me if it's right or wrong. I think it's missing solely because it just takes so long to cultivate. Lando's kind of doing it with Envy right now, but there's no like first take. Howard. Like there's no like just talk show kind of guys where you get on for 2 hours and you talk about what's been going on last week. They have there's no like Stephen A. Smith. I don't know how to explain it, right? There's no like ESPN type morning Golic and Wingo style shows where people just talk. And I think it's because that takes so long to cultivate as a brand. But I feel like that's one of the biggest voids too. And to me, like you can look at all numbers. You're a big data guy. Like podcast and like YouTube or like podcast and conversational content has skyrocketed the last 2 years, like as far as viewership.
Oh, just think like the last month, right? Everyone's freaking stuck inside.
Yeah.
People are creating content left and right. I've seen a bunch of memes on the internet like, oh, I guess it's time to start podcasting now because everyone's doing it. And there is a lot to that. But to your point, a lot of it takes time to cultivate. And the problem is there are a lot of people who have tried doing something like that, like an esports talk show host, round table, around the horn type thing.
Yeah.
And a lot of it has failed. Right. So I do think, to your point, I agree it's missing. But a lot of people have tried to crack that egg and they haven't been successful.
Yeah, I agree. And this might not be the main point, but I think one of the other reasons is like in traditional sports, like I'm a huge basketball fan, but I also watch football and baseball. They intermingle. So when I watch Golic and Wingo, I can get a little bit of everything. In esports, it's sometimes like that, but it's not really like that. Like if I'm a League of Legends watcher, I don't really watch Call of Duty. I don't watch CS:GO. You
don't even watch other MOBAs. Like you don't watch Dota.
No. You don't. I mean? So like if I watch a 45 or hour and a half show and you spend 20 minutes on League of Legends, I'm not watching the rest of it just because you have even though esports is already in its infancy, you have a very small group of people like similar to us that watch multiple esports. Not very many people do it. Like even in Valorant, like I have a couple of buddies who came from CS and I was talking about League of Legends. They have no clue what I'm talking about when I start talking about League. It's just the nature of gamers. You grind out your favorite game, so it's hard.
But yeah, you're right. There's not as much crossover at all. I think one other thing that is lacking especially in the amateur, semi-professional, and then just content, talent, creator space, whatever. And I tweeted this the other day. Just gas up your friends,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if your friends are doing cool stuff, gas them up.
Mm-hmm.
Hit retweet. It doesn't cost you anything.
Yep.
And to to go back to Puckett, and again, a guy I respect so much. Like if you go to his Twitter right now, he has a pin tweet, and I'm gonna butcher the quote, but it's essentially something to the effect of, there are people who gatekeep in this space. I don't want to keep people out. I want to hand the right people the keys.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There are very few in this top 100, we keep going back to that have that mentality, that like genuinely, because let's say 10 years from now, what happens if all the best talent retires?
Yep.
Quits. They move on to admin roles or organizational roles like Papa Smithy did for 100 Thieves.
Mm-hmm.
Then what?
Yep.
Right? Like, do we just start from scratch? Like, there's not a whole lot of thought given to that these days. And I think that there are a couple of people in the talent space who are thinking long-term and who are just, again, genuinely good people who don't suck, who are thinking about this, because at the end of the day, the whole purpose of this is to create something bigger than ourselves.
Yep.
Right? Like we want to create something that generations after us are still going to get to enjoy and that are going to get to partake in. And if we aren't thinking about that now, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think people don't think about how important it is. One, to your point, I've learned that in the military background is like good leaders lead others to replace them. Like a bad leader, like if you have a guy in the military who's a leader and he has 20 people under him, and if he goes away and everything stops, he's a bad leader. Like he should be able to take himself out of the equation. It's like he never was even there. That's how you know that you're leading properly. So that's to that point of what you're saying. But another thing is, I think a lot of people don't realize like how important this stage is. Like, because no one remembers who started the NBA. No one remembers who like cultivated the NFL and cultivated even football. I'll take soccer as one because that's huge, worldwide sport. No one remembers who cultivated the Premier League and stuff like that. Like, but at the same, I think people, because they don't know that and because they don't remember that, they don't realize how crucial it is. Like you said, 4 generations from now, esports could be like the NFL, but that's never going to get there unless we put in the work. And so hopefully more people will open up the space. I do agree that talent is a little bit harder because there's such a minute amount of people. So I'm not going to like try to put words in people's mouth, but I completely agree with you, honestly.
It's just hard. It's a hard situation. And I think when you increase scope and you think about the larger picture, right? The storyline that's going on, I think that's something that's just so important that unfortunately, because we're so in the moment and because we're so caught up in what esports has become, it's very easy to lose sight of that.
I agree. But perfect segue, looking into the future, what are your goals in the esports space as a whole? Obviously, it's probably to cast a world final, but at the same time, like, what are your goals as Doug going into the esports space in the future?
Yeah, I think foundationally, I know I've mentioned this, but I want, in the talent space in particular, I want to help create something that's going to outlive me, that's going to outlive the next generation, that's going to outlive 2 generations from now. I want to help create something big, right? It's something bigger than me. I'm just me. Like I'm just one guy.
Yep.
And when I think about that, it's so narrow-minded and so short-sighted to just think the next 20 years. Like let's freaking talk about changing things, right? Let's make a lasting, meaningful impact on the future and what this esports space can do. So that I say that to like preface everything. I think you hit the nail on the head. Yeah, dude, like that's I remember when I first started looking at talent in the esports space, I just remember getting so caught up in the venues and the lights, and like there's something that's so memorable about I kind of painted this picture for you guys earlier, but let's say that the Valorant situation we were talking about earlier is in a venue and it's a world championship. You associate that voice with that moment.
Yep.
And when it becomes one of the most defining moments of the space of the year of the industry, like that, to be able to help create such a special, such a lasting moment, and yeah, just to be able to be involved, right, and to be able to contribute to something like that, those are intangibles, that's invaluable. And that, yeah, you don't get to do something like that without casting on bright lights, under bright lights, and on big stages. Like those, you need the big stage for something so monumental like that to happen.
Yep, I 100% agree. And the funny thing, you brought up the sound aspect of it. Like, one thing I think of is when Optic Gaming did the run at that CS major and ended up winning it with Rush's team and everything. And I can't remember all the plays. I can't remember everybody they beat, but like I 100% remember like the sound bites and like the casters and the pinnacle moments and stuff like that. Like, you can sound and smell are the two things that trigger memories the quickest, to me at least. But yeah, I 100% agree. And casting a world final would be insane. I can't even imagine like knowing 1.1 million people are listening to your voice talk. I don't know if I could even like utter words at that point. But
well, but think about, like, that's not unique to esports.
It's not,
right?
no.
That it's perfectly in line with traditional sports as well. And whatever your favorite sport is, like I'm a huge baseball guy. Baseball or basketball or hockey or football or golf or whatever it is, there are those defining moments. And when you think about those defining moments, oftentimes if the commentator has done their job, you experienced that moment more meaningfully because they were there, right? Like that was more significant, that was more meaningful, and that was more, in a lot of ways, emotional if that person did their job well.
Oh yeah, 100%. No, I agree. The one sports I can think of is I'm a UVA fan, basketball fan, and when Diakite hit the shot in the Final Four last tournament, like the lead up to that and the way the announcers handled that, like you literally get chills as a UVA fan every time you hear that sound again. It's like I've gone on YouTube and watched it a couple of times just because. So I 100% agree with you on that. Yeah, that I guess that's the pinnacle for every caster. But to your point, it's more for you. It's more personal, I guess, because you want to be able to create that narrative-driven focus. It's not just casting a world final. Like that's not actually the main purpose, to be completely honest. But going in also in the future, what advice? This is such a hard question for everybody. Everybody asks this, they take it a different way. But like, what advice would you give to someone coming up in the same space as you? And I put it in the parentheses of the prompt. It's like, what would you tell Doug on day one? Like when the first day you decided, like, I want to do this full time. What would you tell yourself? It's a hard question.
Two things, and I think they're related. I'm gonna hash them out, and then we'll find out if they were related.
Yeah, okay.
The first one is, and this is two-sided, but you can't spend your entire career looking at other people and what they do. You can't. Like, you can't spend all that time comparing yourself to other talent. You can't. And full like disclaimer, this is a daily battle for me. Like I this is like preaching to the choir. I have to tell myself this every single day. You can't, right? Because it's exhausting. You end out like trying to like hodgepodge what you want to be and what you want to do with what other people are doing, and you're never satisfied because you're chasing something. And in a lot of ways, I want to be really careful about that because I'm very driven and very ambitious personally. So if I'm not climbing this freaking Mount Everest or chasing something almost unattainable, I get bored, to be honest. So I do think there's something to be said there, but you can't compare. Like, Doug, forget about what other people are doing. Right? Like, these are the opportunities that you have right now, and you need to just go in and make the best of those, and don't worry about what other gigs people are getting and how big the gigs are and what games other people are getting to cover. Like, this is what you have, and do that to your best.
Yep. No, I agree. You have to try to beat yourself. I've quoted it before, like, don't try to beat others, try to beat yourself every day. Like the best analogy I can think of is my dad. Like he's a music major. I come from a small town. Like he traveled all around the state of Virginia in a band. Like he was known as the like musician in the area, right? So like me trying to be better than my dad would never happen because even if I was a better like piano player than my dad, I still wouldn't be my dad because he's who he is, right? Like you're still you can't if you try to be better than someone else, you're just gonna fail every time because you can't. Like in sports, you can't try to be Kobe Bryant. He's Kobe Bryant. Like you'll never be Kobe Bryant. I don't care how good you get. You could literally win 7 championships. You're still never gonna be Kobe Bryant. So you try to be better than yourself every day, and you'll find, like going to your point, you'll find happiness way quicker because you'll constantly see progression. You won't see this unattainable ladder that you're never probably gonna hit, basically.
Yeah, and I think the second part, which the more I think about it, the more I realize it is very connected. Is just enjoy the ride, right? Like I got to cast Big Buck Hunter World Championships.
Yeah. If I would have told you the first day you were gonna do that, like what would your reaction be?
Yeah, well, and like how many other people can say that, and like how like the connections that I made and the people that I met, and like just enjoy the ride and enjoy the opportunities you have. Enjoy, like forget about the numbers, forget about the Twitter followers and the viewers and all that stuff, and just like this is what you've been given. Be a good steward. Do it to the best of your ability, and just focus on the longer picture, right? If I get caught up on how many more Twitter followers someone has than I do, I can't enjoy the now. I can't pour everything that I am and everything that I have into my craft because I'm so focused on like, how do I get more Twitter followers? How do I, like all this stuff. And there's something to be said about growth mindset. And I think it's good in certain instances, but at the end of the day, all you're left with is like you in the mirror. That's all you got left.
Yep. No, I 100% agree with you. And the growth mindset thing, I think as we've gotten more in the social media age, I think people are starting to, like smarter people in the business aspect, are starting to see like the differences between numbers and actual like cultivation of community. Because like streamers is a perfect example. I've met certain streamers that didn't give 2 shits about how many viewers they had. They're just trying to work it. One girl is Mitten. She averages like 150 viewers right now. But I promise you, she has the community of the same. She has the same community strength as someone who has 1,000 viewers right now. 100%. Like it's unreal because she didn't worry about numbers. She worried about just being better and like focusing on herself. She didn't care like what happened. So like pointing to what you said, like if you're not happy with what you're doing, like you're gonna get burnt out. Period. Especially in this space, like you're gonna hate yourself in a couple of years, to be completely honest.
I'm like, it's not, and again, tell myself this every day. It's not a sprint. Esports isn't going anywhere, right? Like to go back to what we were talking about earlier, if things go well, this bad boy's going to be around forever.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like take it a day at a time. Yes, like achieve and I'm probably laying on this on so thick because I know my personality, and my personality is I need to take over the world today. And if I haven't taken over the world today, I have failed. Like monumental failure. I'm very hard on myself. Just take it a day at a time. Like slow down. Enjoy enjoy what you got, enjoy what's around you. Like yeah.
Yeah, it's like the Gary Vee comment. He's like, I'm 39 or however old. He's like, you guys think that's old? Like, are you kidding me? Like, I have 40 more years. Like, I'm just getting started. Like, if you have that mindset when you're working, like, it's a lot. You do a lot better, to be honest.
Think of Red Eye.
Yeah.
Like, Paul Chalinera. I butchered his last name, I'm sure. But Paul Red Eye, he's someone who's been around the esports space for a long time. And you look at how old he is. And in esports talk, yeah, he's old, but dude's killing it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like he's the man. He's got freaking memes about him.
Yeah.
So just forget the other stuff. Just live in the now. Just enjoy the now. Like you've got your opportunities, do them to the best of your ability and let chips fall where they may.
Yeah, exactly. And if you enjoy it, like worst possible case scenario, you enjoy something you're doing, you just keep going throughout your life and you have fun with what you're doing. You don't see it as work. Yeah, Doug, those I hope everybody listening, I know they got something out of it, but I hope they're getting something out of somebody who, I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast because you're someone who genuinely like, for lack of a better term, gives a shit like a lot about not just yourself but other people. So I want to thank you for that, and hopefully everybody listening got something out of your story. I know they will. But for everybody listening, if you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, like, leave a comment on any questions you guys may have or anything like that. Hit us up on Twitter. But at the very end, Doug, if you want to shout out, some of your social media handles, anything you want to, promote, obviously I'll put them in the description of everything. But just for
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think there are 4 things I want to plug.
Mhm.
All my handles are the same across Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch. It's at EsportsDoug. But the 4th thing that I want to plug is this man's content.
No.
Right here.
Shut up.
Subscribe to this man. Follow him on Twitter. Follow him on Twitch. Here's the thing, right? I'm going to give you guys a spoiler. I know that he has other guests who are coming onto the show who are way cooler than I am. And you're not going to get it if you don't sub to this man's content. Sub to the man's content. That's the biggest plug of the show.
Talks about gassing people up. Here he goes.
Wrap it up. We're done.
No. Oh, goodness. Well, if you're done, I'm going to, for anybody that's not, EsportsDoug on Twitch.tv. This dude's been grinding out Twitch forever. And if you think he's entertaining now, he's 10 times more entertaining on Twitch. He's constantly trying to improve his stream, asking his stream how to get better. He's hilarious when he streams Warzone and Warzone and Valorant, so you've been streaming lately, but Warzone with Ali from the Rocker and stuff like that. Y'all been grinding
Shout out,
it out.
let's go.
Yeah, exactly. His content's amazing. You follow him on, like you said, your social media handles are pretty much the same across the board on Twitter, Instagram. I know you've been promoting a little bit. Your Twitch, and he also has a YouTube. He's put his highlight. Your casting reels on your YouTube. I know you don't use your YouTube as much, but if you want to get a taste for what he does from a casting perspective, he has his highlight reel on there as well. But yeah, like going back to what you said about gassing people up, I hate when people gas me up because I get like embarrassment. I get embarrassment by association. It's so bad. I hate it. But yeah, man, thank you so much for coming on. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, all his links will be in the description below. If you're listening to us on Spotify or Anchor or anywhere, Apple Podcasts, it's EsportsDoug across everywhere. You can also look at my Twitter, Samajama TV. I'll be promoting his stuff as well while this goes live, and for the future, I'll be standing his content 100%. But thank you so much, Doug, for taking the hour out of your day that I know that you've wanted back for doing a bunch of other stuff that we talked about before the podcast. But any final words before we sign off?
No, just thank you. Thank you. Seriously, this was a blast. I'm so glad you reached out. I genuinely had fun doing this. This was awesome.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. And for everybody listening to Content Workshop, thank you so much. The episodes normally go live on Sunday, but I think I'm going to start doing it on Fridays. But they do go out weekly. The coronavirus has kind of slowed everything down. So if you're listening to this as it's been going on, I'm sorry if it's a little haphazard. But thank you guys so much for listening, and I'll see you guys next time on Content Workshop. Thanks, guys.